Hi, good afternoon from Bangkok. Welcome all our viewers watching us live on SPAFA's Facebook and on Zoom. Be sure to let us know which part of the world you are joining us from by leaving your comments. Thank you for joining the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts, or SEAMEO SPAFA, in today's our SESH titled Disaster Risk Management for Human Securities, Issues, Challenges, and Prospects of Southeast Asia's Rivers and Adjacent Landscape. I am Hatthaya, SPAFA specialist in cultural heritage conservation, and today's your moderator. During the SESH, we welcome questions for our speakers, which we will try to get to during the Q&A portion. We will be choosing one question at random from Facebook and one from Zoom to be the lucky winners of our new SPAFA bag. I'm sorry that today I don't have a chance to show you our bag, but I'm quite sure that it will be very nice for all of you. The winners will be announced at the end of the SESH. So make sure you stay with us until the end of today. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker and discussants. First, let me introduce Kenneth, who is our intern right now. Ken is doing his degree at ICCROM's Mendoza Joint Master Degree in Dynamics of Cultural Landscape, Heritage, Memory, and Conflictualities. Ken has also gained a Master of Arts in Cultural Diplomacy and International Relations. In the next few minutes, he will share his research on the issues relating to the construction project along the rivers in Southeast Asia in connection to disaster risk management of cultural heritage. But before I give the floor to Ken, may I also introduce two honorary discussants. Our discussant, could you please turn on your camera for a while? Then I can introduce you to our audience. The first one, Dr. Rohit Jigyasu, our long-time partner and expert in urban heritage, climate change, and disaster risk management of cultural heritage. Rohit is now a project manager of program unit at ICCROM, or International Center for the Study of Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, based in Rome. He was a vice president of ICCROM, International Council of Monuments and Sites, and a former president of ICCROM, International Scientific Committee on Risk Preparedness, or ICCROM. He also a professor of UNESCO Share Program on Cultural Heritage and Risk Management at Ritsumeikan University, Kyoto, Japan, for several years before he moved to ICCROM. And he has involved in developing disaster risk management plan for a number of heritage sites around the world, including Southeast Asia. So thank you, Rohit. Another discussion is Dr. Danai Thaitakoo, or I call him Ajahn Danai, who is now an advisory expert in research, Faculty of Architecture and Planning, Thammasat University, and adjunct lecturer at Department of Landscape Architecture, Faculty of Architecture, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. Ajahn Danai's research and teaching interests lie in the field of landscape and urban ecology and sustainability, with an emphasis on landscape changes, urbanization, landscape dynamics, and hydroecology and riverscape. Actually, he is working on several interesting research, which I hope we will have a chance to invite him again to share his works here with us in our session. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me now in welcoming our three speakers. And now I think I will give a floor to Ken. So Ken, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Thank you.
Okay, so the floor is yours, Ken.
Okay, I will share a screen. Okay. Can everyone see the full screen of the presentation? Can everyone see? Hello? Can everyone see already the full screen?
Yes, we can see everything. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, PM, for that kind of introduction, and thank you for our dear distinguished panelists, Dr. Rohit and Dr. Danai or Ajahn Danai, for being here with us today to discuss this interesting subject on riverscape and landscapes. Okay, good day to everyone, and I'm architect Kenneth J. Dua, a postgraduate researcher and an intern of SEAMEO SPAFA from April to August of 2021. As part of my internship report and research, I'll be presenting the study that I completed under the tutelage of Ms. Hatthaya Siriphatthanakun, or PM, and SPAFA, together with my joint master degree consortium. The topic is about the disaster risk management of cultural heritage for human security. And the title of this presentation is Issues, Challenges, and Prospects of Southeast Asia's Rivers and its Adjacent Landscapes. Before I proceed to the research proper, I would like to share about my master's study. The internship in its report and research is a requirement before my graduation from my fully funded Erasmus Mundus joint master degree by the European Union, specifically the degree in the dynamics of cultural landscapes, heritage memory, and conflict qualities, or DYCLAM Plus, which aims to train students within 2 years to become experts and managers on conservation, sustainable exploitation, valorization, and numerical mediation of heritage and cultural landscapes. This also includes the International Degree on Master of Arts in Cultural Diplomacy and International Relations to be conferred by the Romanian team as a simultaneous academic years. One of the key goals is enabling us student scholars to understand the complexity of heritage issues, which includes conflicts of interest, overexploitation of cultural sites, ideological and geopolitical manipulation, war, etc. The joint master degree is done in 4 countries and universities, namely at first semester at University Jean Monnet, France, semester 2 at Instituto Politécnico Tomar, Macau, Portugal, semester 3 at University Thaitakoo, Babeș Bolyai, Cluj-Napoca, Romania, and semester 4 at Universidad degli Studi Napoli Federico in Italy. Within the attendees and viewers of this webinar, if any of you are interested on this joint master degree, please visit the website at diclam.eu. We will now proceed to the research and report. The research presentation is divided into mainly 5 parts: mission, introduction and objectives, scope and limitations, methodology, materials and literature and review, analysis and discussion, research conclusion and recommendations, and a section for the acknowledgement, of course. For this internship report and research, there are 2 major missions that were assigned centered on the study of disaster risk management. The first is to attend, observe, and provide webinar support for the training workshop on disaster risk management. Southeast Asia Ministers of Education Organization, Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts, or SEAMEO SPAFA, recently hosted the second training workshop on disaster risk management for cultural heritage in Southeast Asia, with the theme of understanding people, nature, culture, heritage management for building resilience of living traditional settlements, which consists of 15 sessions in collaboration with the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, or ICCROM, and the Institute of Disaster Risk Mitigation for Urban Cultural Heritage, Ritsumeikan University at Kyoto, Japan. In the same training workshop, I was able to gain exceptional knowledge on disaster risk management of Southeast Asia, where it built some of the concepts for the theoretical framework of this report research. And the second mission was to conduct a research on the review of disaster risk management of cultural heritage in Southeast Asia. I applied the learnings and understandings in relation to my master degree study, which covers mainly heritage, conflict qualities, memory, cultural landscape, and human security. And the objective or purpose of this research is to answer the questions: how the protection of cultural heritage from human-induced hazards or traditional security threats and natural hazards in climate change or non-traditional security threats is significant on the human security of local communities and its contribution to the cultural sustainability of society. For the scope and limitations, the research was conducted within a 4 months duration. The scope of the study was limited to the available data, which is mostly online because we are in a pandemic, and the given time constraints. Among the 11 Southeast Asian countries, only 2 were not included, namely Singapore and Timor-Leste, in the analysis and discussion due to the limited data available and accessible at the time the research was conducted. And third, only a qualitative analysis through literature and desktop reviews were accomplished in this research, and the process that could improve the study in the future is to consider a quantitative approach and to execute a fieldwork or more detailed qualitative data. Methodology. There were 3 methodologies used for this report research. Materials and literature review. The first method of the research extracted data centered on the linkages between natural hazards, human-induced hazards, climate change, human security, and disaster risk management. The materials and literature review will indicate the essential factors on identifying the socio-cultural security aspects and the issues and challenges from the Southeast Asian rivers and its adjacent landscapes for cultural sustainability. This can be found immediately after this section of methodology to serve as a theoretical framework and foundation of the study. The next will be comprehensive desktop review. This second method is to investigate the current issues or the recent issues, if I may say, and challenges accessible online on the rivers and its adjacent landscapes located in Southeast Asia. This also includes possible prospects based on the available data during the execution of the study. This data can be found in the review section of this presentation, wherein information collected includes but not limited to news, statements from interviews, reports, and other valuable information stated by concerned stakeholders from the case studies and such literature. And the last will be rate scoring and correlation. The final method is formatted through combining the qualitative data from both reviews and are interpreted through column graphs and radar charts to show the different impacts of hazards and climate change to cultural heritage and its correlation to each other. This can be found in the section of analysis and discussion of this presentation. In Southeast Asia, hereinafter called as the region, recent years have shown the different disasters that had happened in the region, wherein evident countries such as Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, and Myanmar suffered from the most from hazards like flooding, volcanic eruption, earthquake, and also landslides based from the data of the Environmental Systems Research Institute. Additionally, Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific or UNESCA stated that earthquake, tsunami, storm, and flood are the top 3 natural hazards that caused human costs from 1970 to 2016. The frequency of these recurring natural hazards are now being related to climate change and human activities, particularly based from the extreme event attribution, which is still being debated and has become one of the current threat perceptions of the region. The threat posed by these hazards and climate change to cultural heritage is well documented, and its relationship with respect to human security and human development are taken into light, specifically on the dimension of social and cultural. With the initial 7 security dimensions identified by the United Nations Development Program, followed by the UNESCO adding cultural security, and currently in the inclusion of social security as I could say this, proposed by the Baghus design. Daoud, Idris Altman, and Ramli of 2012 argued that albeit the United Nations Human Security Framework is useful and comprehensive, there is a need to modify the framework into specific regions or countries when taking into consideration the specificities of the region. This is agreeable and applicable in the lenses of protecting cultural heritage in the region. The study aims to highlight the importance of cultural security and social security by UNESCO and Baghus during the disaster risk management of cultural heritage amidst natural hazards, human-induced hazards, both hereinafter both called as the hazards, and climate change. Now let's define the 2 security dimensions which will be used throughout the presentation. Cultural security. Specifically on the region, this focuses on the need for the respect of life and cultural heritage through belief systems, language, lifestyles, tradition, value systems, religion, etc. and that culture shapes the relationship of society to environments and is a significant determinant of responses to environmental and other risks and challenges. On the other hand, social security is having access to economic and social safety nets that provide for basic survival needs through public programs and having the reasonable assurance of being helped by the society to live on when faced with any circumstances of dire need. Therefore, it is congruent to cultural security in terms of informal support systems that exist within the community rather dependency on external factors. It is already evident that hazards affects the human security of local communities during these disastrous phenomena. When discussing human security due to hazards and climate change, it is associated with the interactions of livelihoods, cultural change, conflict, and migration. The higher the climate stress from climate change, the higher the cultural change signifies a threat on cultural heritage. Human security insecurity is between the local and national level and is the most vulnerable amidst natural hazards. New research from the social science disciplines such as psychology, anthropology, sociology, and human geography based on the lived experience of extreme weathers and observed climate change argues that climate change is embedded in and acts on culture in myriad ways. Anthropological analysis focuses on identity, community, and economic activities. Climate change and other environmental change affects livelihood activities such as pastoralism, herding, farming, fishing, hunting, and gathering in places where there is a significant observed change. Research has documented how livelihoods and therefore cultural practices have been affected by changes in climate and associated impacts on natural capital. Now, further significant changes in the natural resource based on which made cultures depend would directly affect the cultural core, world values, and etc. While changing socioeconomic and environmental conditions may constrain the existing community coping mechanisms, other studies focus on how cultures adapt to significant societal and environmental changes. Therefore, it is critical to address the risk in the realm of cultural heritage from hazards that are intensified by climate change and human activities. Given these data, for cultural heritage, the perception of climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction and management as two parallel activities should evolve into mutual integration. In the disaster risk management process for cultural heritage sites, climate change impacts should or have been factored in the disaster risk assessment and mitigation practices to attain sustainable development and human security of stakeholders. Through the consistent emphasis of vulnerabilities on recurring threats and by reducing underlying risk drivers that are non-traditional security threats in nature, building resilience and mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in sustainable development agendas shall found a direct connection with attaining human development goals towards human security in the region. Furthermore, in order to address cultural heritage concerns, the addition of the heritage conservation and management is needed to necessitate linkages between policies, institutional, and management systems of cultural heritage with those of local, national, and regional levels. Significantly, a fundamental shift in conservation approach is required from reactive to more proactive approach, aimed to addressing the change rather than mere static preservation in their original state, as defined by a particular time or period. Heritage conservation and management and climate change adaptation of cultural heritage should work directly with disaster risk management, including increased focus on pre-disaster actions to converge with sustainable development in order to achieve cultural sustainability of human security. By adding the factors of hazards and climate change, human security with emphasis on cultural security is social security, or we can call it also social cultural security. Disaster risk management and climate change adaptation will arrive to the theoretical framework for cultural sustainability. Cultural sustainability process of cultural heritage for human security can be explained by using an example of a cylindrical gear system. When cultural heritage is exposed to hazards in climate change, as you can see in the arrows of blue, red, and purple, it is important to undergo the disaster risk management with climate change adaptation in order for cultural security and social security to be attained and to be able to contribute to the sustainable development of society. To have a better look, as you can see in the diagram, the region experiences hazards that are both natural and human-induced in nature, including those that are indirect or secondary. Now, climate change further intensifies these hazards at different levels and localities, like the local, national, and transboundary. Now, the safeguarding of cultural heritage is vital in the process of ensuring human security during these hazards and climate variability. Cultural security and social security or social cultural security are important factors that must be addressed in conjunction rather independently. In a nutshell, issues revolving social cultural security of communities' cultural heritage are needed to be recognized to be able to identify the challenges and future prospects in times of inevitable hazards and climate change and should be factored in the disaster risk management. Although valuing of physical science in mitigating the effects of environmental hazards is well acknowledged, cultural influences affecting adoption of disaster risk management strategies are less acknowledged, and for some localities it is non-existent. Culture within disaster risk management and cross-disciplinary boundaries is in need for due consideration. This is to better understand its impact of resilience and human security. Therefore, case studies and examples focusing on the region's rivers and its adjacent landscapes, cultural heritage shall be examined in the social-cultural facets of human security. The following countries and rivers were subjected to a comprehensive desktop review: Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Myanmar or Burma, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. To begin with, let's start with Vietnam. We have here the Tu Bon River and the Hoi An ancient town, Quang Nam Province. So these are the summary of the issues and challenges and prospects. For this country or for this river, the issues and challenges are flooding, wherein water discharges and erosion due to upstream hydropower dams and sand dredging are also a problem, and also the constant 0.5 centimeters annual rising of sea level. There's also extreme levels of air and water pollution and inadequate garbage disposal due to mass tourism and migration of original local communities. These have deteriorated the river and the ancient town, as well as the source of income of the local people from heritage and their cultural tourism. The prospects are permanent flood solution through risk planning to protect the people and heritage assets, and to provide the migration problem fervent attention, especially to local communities who were displaced by non-local people. For the Philippines, we have the Pasig River and some of the bridge infrastructures in Metro Manila. The main issue and challenge is which is the isolated design and infrastructure of the Binondo Intramuros Bridge, which threatens the buffer zone, the Intramuros of the World Heritage Site, San Agustin Church. And this also includes the authenticity of the Pasig River itself. Subsequently, the construction itself and the bridge itself may cause deleterious effects consisting of visual disruption, pollution, heat and vibration, and traffic congestion that will affect the flow of heritage-related activities and businesses in the area. And also some of which the external properties of heritage buildings within the area. This is also the same for the proposed Pasig River Expressway that is yet to be developed within and under the river itself across the stretch. The prospects are mitigation measures, my apologies, involving redesigning the bridge to a non-arch, state-of-the-art pedestrian-only bridge, which will respect the authenticity of the river and integrity of the buffer zone and the World Heritage Site, reducing the negative impacts from the traffic, subsequently the possible urban heat island effect that may add more to the environmental surroundings. For Malaysia, we have the convergence of the Kelang River and Gombak River, or the River of Life, at Kuala Lumpur. The main issue and challenge is the distorted perception from the infrastructure features of the blue lighting and fog effects that installed onto the river that hides and worsen the current state of the river, which we all know that receives 170 tons of rubbish, mostly are from untreated sewage discharge. Because of this, it creating a false urgency to local people, and the local people remain at throwing their rubbish directly, washing their clothes to the river, and persistent vandalism, which further negatively contribute to the major pollution of the river, causing to flooding. The new features also has altered the ambience of the historical setting and materials of the historical setting, and the materials used for the project are not compatible to the tropical urban fabric of the country. The prospects are emphasizing the river cleanup efforts across the stretch of the river rather at one section. This also includes flood control mitigation. To increase the value of the river and change the perception of the people, it is important to diversify the usage of the river through incorporating transportation system, recreational areas within the river itself, and ecological maintenance. We have here the Laos, which is the Mekong River and the dam at the Luang Prabang, and the proposed dam at the Luang Prabang. The main issue and challenge is the realistic risk from a dam that is 30 kilometers upstream of the World Heritage Site town, the Luang Prabang. And the close proximity itself threatens the authenticity and integrity of the town from a riverside town to becoming a lakeside town, and increase the safety and security issues of the local community, such as a major disaster prompting the breakage of the dam, eventually also may incur flooding. The grave effects to the river's ecosystems and in general have impacts to fisheries and agriculture, thus jeopardizing the food security of the people. The construction itself will displace thousands of people that already have been an issue within the area and affecting their livelihood and source of income from the World Heritage Site. Problems are the same for the proposed or the ongoing China's high-speed railway tower, which further risk on geopolitics and superimposition of external cultural identity. This also includes the proposed commercial hub. The prospects are long-term disaster risk management planning, with the inclusion of all focal stakeholders, especially the local communities, bringing forth first the welfare of its local people before foreign demands in the race to balance modernity. We have here in Brunei, which is the Brunei River and at the Kampong Ayer Bandar Seri Begawan. The issues and challenges revolves around the area being a disaster-prone area, susceptible to storms, floods, and fires. The intense heat from its surrounding environment affects the Bruneian architecture, discouraging residents from rebuilding damaged houses, which are traditionally made with the same traditional materials. During high tides and thunderstorms, floating timber houses and structures sink in flash floods of muddy water, and flooding seeps into the residential and cultural properties, inevitably as well. Pollution is also a major culprit to the landscape degradation and flooding of the area. These factors have negatively contributed to the dramatically declined population over the last decade due to the drastic landward migration, which leaves its cultural properties to economic migrants. The main prospect is the improvement of the quality of life itself, to bring local people back by providing information and general support facilities and tourist services for tourism development, cultural preservation, and heritage-led urban regeneration. The people and its unique setting are its heritage that is needed to be moderately developed from dynamic and contradicting expansion. We have here in Thailand, the Chao Phraya River and the previews or the proposed promenade project at Bangkok. Among the issues and challenges are first flooding, which is one of the persisting problems across the river affecting its cultural properties and human security. And second, and one of the most recent in the years, are the proposed promenade project, which further endangers the authenticity and integrity of the whole river stretch. This also negatively impacts the riverside communities and their heritage assets by disrupting the possibility of its hydrodynamics of the river, resulting to river erosion, flash floods from the concrete wall structure, which is also the same for Rome River, and ultimately and possibly displacing size, which would also result to loss of cultural values and local identity. Prospects are non-structural measures for long-term planning. It is necessary to establish adaptation measures taking into account climate change to develop sustainable flood management. Equally, the inclusion of bringing local communities to the planning stage is vital for a holistic approach in the conservation and protection of Thailand's cultural heritage sites. We have here an example by landscape architect Ronald Danakosis and his great team, which proposed a citizen and heritage-led solution from their example of 3 out of the 14 communities within the Chao Phraya River, as you can see here in the image. For Cambodia, we have the Siem Reap River and the Angkor Wat Temple Complex. Issues and challenges are evidently pollution from over-tourism, which includes noise, traffic jams, increase of immigrants, and direct discharge of garbage dump and wastewater to the river are still problems that affects the site and its environs up to this day, not until, of course, the current pandemic that we are experiencing. This accounts to the annual flood susceptibility and further brings sediment to the river channel, thereby destroying the continuity of its ancient hydraulic system that protects Angkor from natural hazards. Additional impacts on infrastructure rise from tourism facilities such as hotels, resorts, and restaurants, and etc. that surrounding the temple itself considerably extract gallons of water underneath, thus affecting the water table stability and the balance of sand and water that maintains the foundation of the Angkor Wat. This results to possible land subsidence, posing threats to the preservation of the outstanding universal value of the temple and the conservation of the river and the terrestrial ecosystems. The main prospect is putting to the agenda the authentic local cultural tourism for socioeconomic development is essential in moderating the effects of over-tourism to hazards and climate change. Likewise, in leading a peaceful social agreement with stakeholders towards a sustainable society. For Indonesia, we have the Ciliwung River and the Old Town of Jakarta. Issues and challenges are in addition to the recurring flooding that have devastated local communities, where even some of them are indigenous people of itself. The river also, here we have the river normalization projects in the recent years that added to the social safety net problems of the majority of the riverfront communities. Likewise, affects cultural properties like the fortified walls by the VOC or the Dutch East India Company that was constructed decades ago. Additionally, forced resettlement damages the socio-cultural fabric, such as cultural services and river practices of the kampong or the village, where majority of the livelihoods are dependent. Main prospect is the inclusion of the aspect of informal support system for socio-cultural security to disaster risk governance, affirming the community development within local communities in protecting the riverfront cultural heritage, most of which, and most of important of all, is the intangible heritage and values. And last but not least, we have Myanmar or Burma. We have the Ayeyarwady River and the Irrawaddy dolphins of cooperative fishing. The issues and challenges are hydro power and irrigation dams like the proposed mid-zone dam, which is threatening the river being the last river not to have a dam, but possibility of having a dam itself. We also have the overfishing, electrofishing affecting the dolphins, pebble and sand mining that can change the chemistry of the river, gold and jade mining, which uses mercury and cyanide, causing irreversible damages and other threats to biodiversity. The former has direct consequences to cultural heritage, which is the cooperative fishing between the Irrawaddy dolphins and the castnet fishermen, while the latter concerns more of the biodiversity. Nevertheless, these threats have varying effects in different levels to the natural heritage. The main prospect is, with regards to the other prospects that we have discussed, is synergizing nature conservation with the heritage realm in the agenda to address the concerns of both ethnic groups and the Irrawaddy dolphins in adapting prevention and mitigation measures. Now let's move forward with the analysis and discussion. In summary, there are 5 correlated issues and challenges, or CIC, identified in the region of Southeast Asia. The region's cultural heritage faces the following: displacement and migration, or DM, landscape degradation, or LD, infrastructure project impacts, or IPI, rising heat temperature, RHT, and flash flood and flooding, or the triple F. The researcher assigned, or me, I assigned scales 1 to 9 to examine the level of impact, 1 being the lowest, as you can see in the graph here, and 9 being the highest. The scale is uniform in all of the column graphs and radar charts, with differentiating equivalency in terms of A, number of C countries exposed or affected, and B, projected identified factors. This will show the correlated impacts of the correlated issues and challenges in Southeast Asia's heritage. In Figure 34, the stack column graph on risk occurrences showed that Southeast Asian countries mostly exposed at present, the region's cultural heritage is mostly exposed from infrastructure project impact at present, while the region is projected to further expose on both landscape degradation and infrastructure project impact. Rising heat temperature has the highest projected exposure, which is double of its current state. It is important to note that the region is mostly tropical countries, wherein the perception of hot weather is normal, but the effects of climate change already shown the increase of maximum temperature, and the direct impacts will be felt more in the coming years. Although correlated issues and challenges are present at its own state, most of the risk occurrences are rooted from the infrastructure project impacts, such as the effects brought by the bridges, dams, promenade, walls, and other related infrastructure construction and expansion. In Figure 35, column graph on climate change risk, identify the projected risks from the changing climate and variability posed by the correlated issues and challenges in Southeast Asia. Based on the 9 indicators, which is extracted from UNESCO, risks were identified for each correlated issues and challenges. Infrastructure project impact has the highest number of projected identified risks, while rising heat temperature has the lowest. Identifying the risks were based on its presence in the case studies and how cultural heritage were affected directly and indirectly. Among the indicators, the following are present in all of the Southeast Asian countries: atmospheric moisture change effects, biological effects and variabilities, incidences of extreme weather, and an increase in heavy precipitation, while wind anomaly and intensity is the least identified in the region. In Figure 36, column graph on human insecurity identified the projected insecurity from the correlated issues and challenges in Southeast Asia. Displacement and migration and infrastructure project impact equally are the highest compared to rising heat temperature and flash flood and flooding as the lowest. Landscape degradation has the middle value. Although rising heat temperature and flash flood and flooding causes direct damage to the tangible heritage in terms of deterioration and destruction in which the region is mostly exposed, the human-induced related hazards from infrastructure project impacts and displacement and migration have greater impact when it comes to intangible heritage such as local values and cultural identity. Among the 9 categories of human insecurity, cultural and health insecurity are present in all of the correlated issues and challenges in the region, followed by social, environmental, and economic security. Noticeably, appearances of problems on cultural and health aspects are interconnected to social, environmental, and economic aspects in the region. Combining the data on figures 34, 35, and 36 as you have seen earlier, this results to this figure, which is figure 37. The reader chart on disasters from the correlated issues and challenges in Southeast Asia. The effects of climate change risk to the current risk occurrences show the drastic increase in the number of Southeast Asian countries exposed from these risk occurrences, as well as the projected human insecurity in the region. The chart shows how natural hazards and human-induced hazards from correlated issues and challenges in the region heighten the disaster risk of cultural heritage as a result of the effect of climate change. There is gradual increase of disaster risk from displacement and migration, landscape degradation, and flash flood and flooding. Rising heat temperature has a drastic increase of risk occurrences with climate change correlating to human insecurity. While infrastructure project impact is already facing human insecurity at current risk occurrences, and risk occurrences is subjected to increase as the consequence of climate change goes frequent and more higher. The correlated issues and challenges in the 9 Southeast Asian countries showed the effects of hazards and climate change to cultural heritage. It gives clear data how people are affected by the negative impacts of cultural heritage and why climate change adaptation is critical in disaster risk management to achieve cultural sustainability. Moreover, based on the case studies, the major impacts of cultural heritage in terms of social-cultural security are centered on the cultural change and livelihood disruption. Cultural change emphasizes the influence of cultural capital on individual and community behavior, and sometimes called repositioning of culture. In this study, cultural change is connected to the definition of cultural security by UNESCO and the frequency of cultural values and heritage being affected. In figure 38, column graph on cultural change showed that Southeast Asian countries' cultural heritage is mostly affected by landscape degradation, while the region is least affected by rising heat temperature in terms of direct effect. Based on the case studies, landscape degradation is a result of the other correlated issues and challenges. Therefore, it should not be solely identified as the major concern to the cultural change of heritage. Rather, be given more focus in accordance to the other correlated issues and challenges and correlated causes of cultural change, which equally affects the outstanding universal value of heritage and its people. Livelihood disruption. This is the negative impacts of not attaining social security due to the disturbance or loss of livelihood from cultural heritage and related activities, and the frequency of informal support systems being affected as defined by the Bakhus design. There is no specific equivalent for each correlated issues and challenges since the disruption is specific per country and community. Moreover, being affected by different factors, one of which is the cultural change, which we will focus our livelihood disruption there. Hence, it is measured by the frequentness it was stated for cultural heritage in the case studies. In figure 39, the column graph on livelihood disruption showed that Southeast Asian countries' cultural heritage is mostly affected by both landscape degradation and flash flood and flooding, while the region is least affected by rising heat temperature. In relation to social-cultural insecurity, there is a relativity of 86.76% between cultural change and livelihood disruption. Therefore, the correlated impacts of hazards and climate change equally affects also the human security in the region, justifying further the need to recognize cultural heritage through social-cultural security in the human security agenda. In summary, the findings showed that there is an approximation of at least 54.81% to 83.83% maximum correlation of the impacts of natural hazards and human-induced hazards and climate change to the cultural heritage of the 9 Southeast Asian rivers and its adjacent landscapes. The considerable range percentage displayed the importance of disaster risk management with climate change adaptation to cultural heritage in addressing the correlated issues and challenges that are local, national, and transboundary in human insecurity scale. The data further indicates that human security is simultaneously affected in the destruction of cultural heritage, resulting to negative cultural change and livelihood disruption. Albeit both cultural security and social security are aspects of human security that must be taken into consideration holistically in its own form, it must be dealt abreast as social-cultural security to amplify each security's significance and magnitude. The impacts found, and for the conclusion and recommendation, the impacts found in the rivers and its adjacent landscapes are correlated to each other, magnifying the underlying connection of hazards and climate change to the elements of human security. Albeit natural hazards are the consequence of these correlated issues and challenges. Human activities and or human-induced hazards, such as infrastructure project impacts, are the main causes and considerably augments the effects of climate change, further intensifying the natural hazards. Case studies provided with the case studies here that have been discussed provided mutual evidences of the significance of cultural heritage in attaining social cultural security for the human security of local communities situated on and near rivers and its adjacent landscapes. Correlated issues and challenges require disaster risk management with climate change adaptation based on the nature of problems that hazards may arise. Now, looking back to the theoretical framework diagram of the cultural sustainability process, issues and challenges in the social cultural security aspects of cultural heritage in the region, as what we have said, requires disaster risk management and climate change adaptation. Therefore, the social cultural security is significant in the whole process of identification, mitigation, and preventive measures. If we are to add the correlated data of AdCare et al. 2014 that we have discussed earlier on the cultural sustainability process framework, it will result to this diagram, wherein the data and the X and Y axis of climate stress and scales of insecurity are reflected and integrated in the diagram. The diagram further illustrates how unaddressed correlated issues and challenges centered on social cultural security may affect the cultural sustainability of a society. Considering the impacts of correlated issues and challenges through the hazards, including indirect and secondary from climate change, are not recognized and addressed as problems of social cultural security. This may result to its maturity, as you can see, when the hazards, climate change became human security problems to its maturity and affect the cultural sustainability process. The impacts of climate change and hazards are described approximately by plotting these as the balls or foreign objects that you have seen in the gear system. These foreign objects that matured at a certain level, as you have seen within the climate stress spectrum in the diagram, may affect the cultural sustainability process as it drops in the cylindrical gear system or the cultural sustainability. The interaction of the foreign objects or the balls, which signifies unaddressed issues and challenges, that when it matured at a certain level and drops, it will affect the cultural sustainability process, which are the wheels, which means constant adaptation, and may cause human insecurity, or as you can see in the gear system, which is abrasive wear, or for this one, which signifies hazards turned into impacts. Reiterating, the higher the exposure to climate stress, the higher the chances it will affect cultural heritage and will pose a challenge to the disaster risk management process. While the lower the climate stress, the higher the chances that cultural and social security systems are in place for resilience and sustainable development of human security. In order to strengthen the disaster risk management process, social security factors must be recognized and emphasized in the whole process of protecting cultural heritage in the region. In final conclusion and recommendations, the overall disaster risk management cycle is important for the sustainability of riverfront communities, but there should be an emphasis on pre-disaster interventions, specifically on risk prevention and mitigation. Now, we all know that the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction affirms the importance of integrating cultural perspectives in all policies and practices to achieve disaster risk reduction. The cultural sustainability framework further stressed the need to protect or support the protection of cultural heritage, and this entails inclusion of social and cultural requirements for resilience. Identifying and emphasizing the social security aspects in the protection of cultural heritage realm to disaster risk management is vital in the process of cultural sustainability and moderating and shaping human development in the Southeast Asia region. The aim of this study has been to provide a region-specific comprehensive research on how hazards and climate change can affect the social security of a society through cultural heritage. I hope that the information collated and presented today in the study will lead to further discussion and research in this field. Ultimately, I recommend further study on the quantitative aspects of socio-cultural security and to research on case studies that are inconspicuous yet experiences the same phenomenon for cultural heritage and its people. Before I end this presentation, I would like to thank landscape architect Hatthaya Siriphatthanakun and the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization Regional Center for Archaeology and Fine Arts, or SPAFA, for this opportunity to tackle these timely cultural heritage problems in Southeast Asia. Moreover, for sharing their knowledge and expertise in the study, and most important of all, by accepting me as their intern amidst this pandemic. Your generosity will forever be valued. Thank you very much. And also, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to the following scholars, professors, and institutions stated in this slide for accepting me as their fully funded Erasmus Mundus student scholar for the past 2 years. I wouldn't be here without them. And that concludes my presentation. In the words of my consortium, native country of my internship and language, I would like to say, merci de votre aimable attention. Molto pentru attenzione dumia vostra. Molte grazie per la cortese attenzione. Muito obrigado pela sua atenção. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much, everyone, for your kind attention. Have a nice day.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Kenneth, for your wonderful, informative, and comprehensive presentation. It's excellent. Before we ask Ajahn Danai and Rohit to give their inputs, may I also ask them if they have any questions or any or need any clarification from you, Kenneth, right? Okay, so Ajahn Danai ka and Rohit, do you have any questions or do you need any clarification from?
I would say that Kenneth had such a clear presentation that there are no questions for him. I mean, there are comments that we'll make, but it was very clear. So thank you for your excellent presentation.
I do not have any question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rohit and Dr. Danai. Honestly, it is a great pleasure and honor to have you both here. With Dr. Rohit, with much of my study is actually based from his decades of study, which this would not be possible that I would be able to, defend some of the theories and the knowledge behind. And of course, for Dr. Danai, which I actually have read some of your researches for the study in trying to cross-check and to, clarify, confirm if these, like for example, the hydrodynamics and etc. of rivers are actually one of the reasons to the problems of communities. So it is really a great pleasure to have you both here, and thank you very much.
Yeah. If there are not any questions for Ken from our discussions, may I starting from Rohit for your inputs to Ken's presentation. So Rohit, what do you think about how disaster risk management of cultural heritage can provide or increase human security from your own experience in practice.
Thank you, Hatthaya. First of all, I would say that I think Kenneth has taken the work that has been done so far in this area of disaster risk management for cultural heritage a step forward. And I would like to congratulate him for making that effort. In fact, with your research, what I feel is you have kind of opened a door to question a lot of established practices. And I would say that I would begin with questioning even the fact that we look at disaster risk management and development or rather impact assessment from development projects in a very different isolated separate shells. We don't see the connection between them. We have a separate tools and methodologies for making an impact assessment for development projects, and then we make a separate disaster risk management. But your work actually clearly shows that that you really need to see them together, because a lot of things that are happening are because of development projects that actually create a situation where there's an impact on the climate. There are also impacts on the social and cultural lives of the people. So I feel that that this kind of really your work really opens up that main rethinking that we need to do in this area. The second thing I also wanted to really compliment you for linking cultural dimensions with nature, because you have really, at ICCROM, we are also questioning that we have been looking at management of sites very much in isolation, separating culture from the natural setting, and really doing any disaster risk management at the level of just your cultural site is not going to be really reducing the vulnerability in the long run. So you have to really look at the whole territory or the whole landscape as a whole. And because a lot of things that are happening in the surroundings, as you said, like if there is a change in the ecology, if there is a impact on the construction of a dam, or that's going to have real impact on heritage, so and it might be much further away from the site. So your research really brings that connectivity back again and demonstrates that you have to really consider these things together beyond the boundaries of what a site is. So I think there's a lot of implication on the way we manage heritage sites if we consider these aspects. The third aspect that I want to also highlight, and that I feel like when you say human security and you talk about the social and the cultural dimensions of security, I think you also touch a lot on the economic dimensions of security, because livelihoods of the people as they get affected are also. So probably it's not, we should look at both social, cultural, but also economic dimension of security, because they're so much interconnected with each other. And I would also say that while we talk about the impact on the values of the site, how they are impacted, as you say in one of your slides, probably we should also at certain point clarify that tangible and intangible are also interconnected. So let's not see them separately, because I mean, for long we have done this separation, that we want to see the impact on the tangible dimension of heritage, and then we consider separately the intangible dimension. But I think from the beginning, one has to make a framework in which you look at both the tangible and the intangible dimension as those which are intertwined with each other. Because if you make that framework from the beginning, you actually, a lot of human security dimensions are very much interconnected with this kind of a holistic understanding of heritage. And so, we don't want to see human security again standing in isolation, but we also need to see that human security is very much embedded in the way your heritage, heritage exists. The last point I want to make is on the aspect of change. I think at certain point we have to also accept that you have to adapt. You mentioned adaptation in mitigation in your adaptation and mitigation strategies, but the adaptation and mitigation strategies can also be embedded in your cultural heritage. So it's not that you do them as an intervention from outside. A lot of cultural heritage has evolved over time because they have adapted to these changes. So rather than looking at something that you need to do as a separate intervention, looking at adaptation and mitigation as a part of the evolution of heritage itself. You know what I'm trying to say is very important, because we need to also see that these different dimensions are embedded in heritage, not really seen as separate things that are just linked with each other. So I think that kind of embeddedness of these dimensions in heritage is going to be a very important thing for us to follow as we develop this in the future. I will conclude by saying that you should also, in your thesis, in your research in the future, look at the impact of these on governance, because this has a very strong impact on how we manage our heritage, with these different jurisdictions, with these different ministries, departments, all isolated and cut with each other. So at certain point, if you can also link what you're doing with the way things are governed, and kind of make a new suggestion for how governance should be impacted with this kind of a new approach, would be a very important contribution in my view. So, well, it was great to listen to you. Congratulations again. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Thank you, Rohit. We still need you for the next couple of questions. But actually, I can also add something like when we're thinking about the title of this presentation and his research, Ken already pointed out about the aims of disaster risk management of cultural heritage, which actually only disaster risk management of cultural heritage for our professional points of view, or for people who are working for the World Heritage, we really focus on how to conserve the attributes and values of the site from disaster and any kind of hazards. But actually, at the end of the conservation, it's not just to conserve the fabrics of the past events, but finally, it's just for the well-being of people who are living in that heritage, or who own the heritage, or who benefit from this heritage in the future. That's why we put the terms human security at the end of the disaster risk management of cultural heritage for human security, something like that. And yeah, so now may I turn to Ajahn Danai. Ajahn Danai ka, what based on your expertise, what do you think about the correlation between changing river and its landscape and disaster risk management?
Okay, I'm thinking about how I'm going to start. When you discuss about the river and you call it changing, I would say, you're dealing with the dynamics of nature. So it's constant changing, or you can call it change is norm when you are talking about the river. And these, it's a, you're asking about correlation. Yes, definitely. When you are looking at, so I would, would like to add to Dr. Rohit just said, a landscape approach. So you look at the whole landscape beyond the site boundary. And then you not just look at the pattern of, what the nature, natural patterns or human patterns, built patterns. You're also looking at the process, a natural process, human process. And then I would say the first thing would be a fluvial process, the process that built the landscape. And then, when the first human arrive in this landscape and then start to build, the communities, village, town, city, or, if you in a favorable landscape, favorable condition, rivers, so you can build the empire. And then you can see, you know, a lot of empires or city, you know, just disappear or collapse because, you know, something happened. The favorable condition is not favorable at all, you know, no longer favorable. So I would say the most important point is, you know, the question that do we understand the landscape? Do we understand the river? Right. So if you say, you know, that whatever the heritage or the landscape heritage, the cultural heritage is actually built upon the landscape, which is, you know, start with the product of the nature. And then, you know, humans just engage or using that kind of the product of nature. And then you know, form a natural heritage is a bridging with the cultural heritage. So, you know, two things is cannot separate when you talk about, you know, cultural heritage. Start out what, you know, what a natural heritage provide to the human settlement, and then you build the cultural heritage over the top of that. So understanding the dynamics of nature, the river, and then the landscape, and then understand, you know, what the relationship between human and the landscape would be crucial to understand, you know, what the issue is. When you talk about disaster in many places, you know, the flood is not a disaster. Flood is a, you know, a very beneficial. But, you know, when you know, in the wrong place and the wrong time, something that, you know, very beneficial can become a disaster. So, you know, part of it is more like a perception, or you put yourself in the wrong place and the wrong time. And then you're looking at, you know, original settlement, you know, would take advantage of what the landscape and the river provides, you know, for you to settle, you know, as a community, village, or town or city. And then you build the empire over the top of that. And then, so it's more like, you know, a different type of relationships. You are more symbiosis, or you are more like adaptation, you know, some modification and all those kind of things. So this kind of relationship, when you're looking at, you know, over the period, over the over time, so you have the landscape development over time, and then, you know, as long as, you know, humans have a modern technology, you start to forget about, you know, what you built upon, you know, originally. And then the relationship between human and nature change. So you look at the role of the river, very different. And then you not recognize, you know, what the dynamics of the nature. For example, you look at the riverine landscape or fluvial landscape. So you have, you know, what it called, for example, floodplain, right? And then people utilize floodplains, you know, as a farmland, agricultural, you know, production. So the resilience of the landscape and then the nature of landscape, so you can, you know, use it. And then you take advantage of, you know, the flood period, inundation periods, and then the dry period. And then you select the one, you know, the high ground to build, you know, the house, the city. But right now you just, you know, actually you build, you know, the human habitation into the floodplain. And then the disaster start to emerge. So you can see, you know, a lot of, you know, disaster that happen is, you know, the nature just, you know, do their own thing. But the human induced change, you know, just create this kind of disaster. So my point is, you know, we understand, you know, what the natural process, the natural dynamic is, and then we put ourselves in the area that, you know, put ourselves into that kind of risk. And when you manage the risk, so you already say that, you know, it's a natural risk and then human induced risk. So the two, you know, we understand the landscape and the rivers. You know, the dynamic of riverine ecosystem is very, very crucial to understand. And then riverine landscape, you know, alluvial fan, floodplains, all these things is quite important for us to understand it and then to look into it again of what we do. We make a mistake. We built our community in the wrong place. The modern one. I would say the original one, they co-evolved with the landscape, with the river through times. Through several mistakes, the floodings, all those kind of things, until they know how to mitigate, and then pick a favorable landscape, and then leave that in that space, in that landscape. So I would say, this is from my point of view is the question is, we understand the landscape, the riverscape, and then the dynamics of it, and change, natural change, and then you talk about human-induced change, for example, so the climate change, or you talk about let's say climate variability, seasonal, dry and wet, kind of that, and then you're looking at as these kind of evolution through times, and then you learn from what people used to live with this, modification, adaptations, mitigations. But right now, I think we very much we forget about all these kind of things, and then we have the problem that we built something that not concerned about the dynamics world that we live in, the dynamic of natures. And then I would say, how would we understand these the dynamics of the landscape when you talk about river and the landscape? And then the whole landscape, looking at the landscape scale, monument site, and then the surrounding, or the whole watershed. So a lot of flood problems, the water problems, sedimentation, erosion might, the source of that problem might, from the dam, 100 kilometers away, all those kind of things. And then it's more like a multiple scale that you have to take a look at, what kind of the problem, the original problem come from. I would say it's very, very, very difficult, because sometimes you cannot touch that, the original problems. So you have to deal with what you just already do a wonderful work of how we deal with the problem, but it's more like at the other end, but we don't touch at the beginning of the problem that much of what who originate these problem in the first place, and how we how could we deal with that. So I think that what very complex problem that we have to deal with in today and in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Danai. Yeah, I think it's really clear for what we asked. Like we really need to understand about the natural processing. Then we can understand the cultural emergence, and we can see how the problems start and how it's developed to be a kind of disaster later on. I have another question for both of you, Ajahn Danai and Rohit, but I'm not sure who's going to give a response first. From the presentation of the review of the situation in the rivers in Southeast Asia, and for you, from your own experience, are there any other concerning issues and suggestions on enhancing the riverscapes and their adjacent areas? Is it clear for the question? Like you see, there are many phenomena happen, natural and also cultural. The construction projects or another kind of hazards. But from the information Ken revealed, do you think is there any other concerning issues, and do you have any suggestions on that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I feel that we can't look at rivers in isolation. Rivers are part of a larger ecosystem, and the moment we start to separate, interventions for rivers, we want to clean the river or make riverside development, or we are looking river, it's like you take body and just look at one part of the body without considering that it is connected to the whole. And whatever you do in that part will have an impact in the other parts of the body, and you're not considering that. So that is, I think, the major problem here. We need to look at rivers not as rivers, but as part of a larger ecological system. And then ecological system also should not be understood only in terms of water flow and the landscape aspects, I mean, natural aspects. The cultural aspects are very much embedded in that ecosystem. You know, this is again another problem because of the separate development, the whole word ecosystem came from nature side. And so it looks at only nature when it looks at ecosystem. But in my view, we should look at ecosystem, which is more of a systemic approach to both the nature and the culture. And see how they overlap with each other, you know. So I feel like that kind of an approach would be more useful, and the actions that are taken by considering that kind of a holistic approach will be more making us do some better solutions than kind of creating challenges, as Kenneth has really brought out in his research.
Yes. Yeah, actually, absolutely. When we're talking about anything related to river, we cannot just only talking about a certain location of that rivers, because we really need to think about the upstream area, the downstream, the mouth of the river, and the area connecting to that river as a whole or river basin, which sometimes it's go beyond one river basin. It can connect to the other basin. I think for this perspective, Ajahn Danai knows it very well because actually it's also related to my dissertation. So Ajahn Danai, do you have anything to add?
I would say I very agree with Dr. Rohit. And I would say, you know, our problem is we separate, you know, ourselves from the nature. So when you talk about all these, we might look at, you know, the heritage site. We might look only the area, you know, the built, whatever, the monuments, the built that, you know, human built in the landscape, but not really look into, you know, the relationship between human and the landscape or the rivers. And I would say, yeah, you cannot separate two things, you know, have the same view as Dr. Rohit. We cannot separate between, you know, nature heritage and then the cultural heritage. It's mixed. It's I would say it's intermixed. It's overlaid. It's already overlaid each other. When you talk about, you know, the city, it's actually, you know, if you the city is built upon what the river, the landscape can provide you, you know, at the beginning, and people just, you know, do not see it that way. So we just, you know, are more, I would say, my experience, I just say people just more to, okay, we want to take care of what, you know, humans already built, you know, as a monument, but do not kind of look at the whole landscape as the process, right? We look at something as an object, as a pattern of, you know, human built, you know, environment, but do not look at what the process of how, you know, human engage with nature, with the landscape, with the river. In some project in Thailand, you know, there are project of what they call it, you know, the old towns planning. Several old towns actually, you know, directly linked with the river. So if you don't have the river, you're not gonna have the town. And then in that master plan to develop the old town, they actually omit the area of the river. They don't have any idea about, you know, how would you manage the river. They don't see, you know, the river is kind of a very critical element, you know, of the city, of the old towns. So that somehow, I don't know why, you know, people cannot see these, you know, relationship. It actually, it's a direct, because, you know, the river provides the service. It's not ecosystem service, you know, above the ecosystem service, people, human build their relationship with the river, and then they create as a, you know, economic services, social service, and then cultural service built upon what the landscape, give you, the river, the floodplain, alluvial fan, the mountain. So you can see, a lot of culture represent the relationship, of human and the landscape and the rivers. So, just like Dr. Rohit said, it's already embedded in there. But somehow, when people making a plan, making a policy, don't see it that way. Just look at a more like a dead monument, something, a building separate one, but not look at the whole process of how human engage the landscape, the river through time, the historical dimension of it too. Original, was one thing, and then today is another thing, and then how would you link all these, together and then represent it, which is, I would say, today is kind of lacking of, thinking about the process. We're just thinking about, something, it's kind of an object, a pattern, rather than the process of human and river and the landscape. So that, my point of view of, the relationship. So I don't talk about, the river quality or what that kind of thing, but, the quality that human, link with the river, with the landscape, the connection between human and the landscape and the rivers. And then it's makes, build the whole landscape. So it's not just in the natural, but it's human cultural landscape. It's kind of, it's mixed, it's overlaid on the top of each other already. It's embedded. It can be separate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajahn Danai. Before we give the opportunity for people who are listening, Ken from our Facebook, as well as in the Zoom room here, I have only a last question for Dr. Rohit and Ajahn Danai. Like, do you have any more inputs to help strengthen or enhance Ken research in the future?
Okay. Which Kenneth can further improve if you start to work with non-heritage sectors more. You need to work a lot more with the environment sector. You need to work a lot more with the development sector, because these sectors have already been thinking a lot in this area, but probably they have not linked to heritage perspective in their thinking. And the way you have tried to approach from a heritage centered approach, you can, by linking with these different sectors, environment and development sector, you need to develop a synergy, you need to develop a common vocabulary, you need to develop a kind of a common tools, because that, I think, would be great contribution. Because if we have to really proceed to another level of really synergic action, to address these kind of gaps, what we require is really intersectoral cooperation. So that would be my real suggestion for you.
Thank you, Dr. Rohit. This noted. This well noted.
Okay. My suggestion would be, I would say, very similar to Dr. Rohit, but more, conceptual. For example, UNESCO separate between natural heritage and cultural heritage. But when you talk about, cultural heritage, you have both natural heritage and cultural heritage in the same space. But somehow, the definition of that, you're not mixed together. Or the modern, natural heritage, you talk about, let's say, the existing human settlement within national parks, all those kind of things, right? So you cannot separate. So I would say, my suggestion is more, as conceptual level at this point, how would you bridge natural heritage and a cultural heritage, right? I would say that's my suggestion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Danai. Ajahn Danai. Noted.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ajahn Danai. So when I turn to the questions from our audience, if at any point, besides Kenneth, if Ajahn Danai or Dr. Rohit would like to contribute, just feel free to speak out. Okay, so we have a questions from Tika from, I think, Indonesia, I guess. I'm not sure. Karatika, her question for Ken is, what are the reasons to choose the river location for the research?
Okay. Thank you very much, Miss Kartika, I think. Thank you for that question. When the task or mission was assigned to me, me and PM, Ms. Hatthaya, were looking at the idea of trying to tackle recent years or current issues. So that's one of those things. And when we look at each of the country, we try to find I'm not saying the latest because we have pandemic, but rather the really much more latest before pandemic, if I may say, the issues, so that we can in a way be address timely issues. So that's very important. And that's one of the major factors. Another thing is the fact that given that we're in a pandemic and there will be a scarce resource, let's say going to the library and only online books that will be available, that's also one of those reasons to be able to choose those rivers, because it's hard to choose issues, choose case studies that needs heavy research. So like as a researcher, I would want to present to the audience a research that is well backed up while still being valid. So that's one of the reasons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. I have another question for you. Can you please give example how infrastructure project impacts directly affect local communities and its heritage?
Okay, thank you very much, PM. So I am going to give an example, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can give an example based from the presentation. So for example, we have many dams along the Mekong River. And if we're going to check the impact, is first the construction itself disrupts the surrounding environment. And that is in terms of construction pollution, the stabilization of the water table. So those one of the things. And I think second will be the filling up the dam. So of course, when we have the dam, we need to fill up water on that. And when we fill up the dam, there's this saying that it also entails that the faster that you fill up the dam, the faster that you're actually uh, creating a landscape degradation, because take effect in terms of the nourishment of the landscapes near the river, the livelihood, which is in terms of the level of water in which the fishes can live, something like that. So that's one of the things. And also we can also check on the direct impact to heritage, which is the certification of the areas near the area. Thus, it will affect, how can I say this, livelihoods, specifically in rural areas. Now, let us not forget that, for example, the dams, there's a possibility of breakage, if I may say, when it comes, there are like hazards, like what we have said here. And this can actually wipe out an entire local community. And history will show that this has already happened, especially in Asia. So this is one of those things that are, how can I say, this just a tipping point. And flooding can also be a subsequent effect. And I think lastly, the how can I say this, the changes in the environment would subsequently affect the authenticity, integrity, and outstanding universal value of the World Heritage Sites. Like for example, in Luang Prabang, that is being, if I'm not sure what's the current situation, but they are currently being threatened. And these issues within Southeast Asia, like in the Mekong River, it's not only happening in Southeast Asia itself. We also have issues like the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or the GRD, which is located near Egypt, and it is endangering the outstanding universal value of Nile River and its adjacent landscapes. Therefore, we can say that infrastructure project impacts during and after its construction poses cascading impact both to the communities and their heritage. So in essence, I'm not saying that I am completely and solely saying that the infrastructure project impacts are the main cause, but rather when we think of infrastructure projects, we should know that when we locate it and when we build it strategically, it should not really affect the local communities. And if there will be such heritage cultural heritage, it should not also affect, because we have seen here in the presentation that it really affects the people and of course the cultural identity. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken. I would add some points for this question, because when we are talking about the construction or infrastructure construction project in this, particularly in this region, Southeast Asia, normally so far, I think, I'm not sure in every country, but at least in most of the country, we do environmental impact assessment, which actually it's quite problematic. As I can say, my sister is also the environmental engineer and really point out the problems of environmental impact assessment at present. And it's not actually covered to the heritage aspect. That's why in many countries in the region really needs to develop our own strategy for heritage impact assessment, which one can argue that in the environmental impact assessment already include the heritage part, but actually it's not enough. And I think the process of the implementation and the study is not really, how can I say, not really help to identify the issues and the measures to reduce the impact to the rivers or to the area affected. So I think that's the other thing. And we are actually, for SPAFA side, I'm not going to advertise, but we are also thinking about to do something related to heritage impact assessment in the near future as well, right? Rohit, as a part, your ICCROM is always our partner. So that's the point that I think it's related to the question our audience raised to you, Ken. I have another. It's not actually a question, but actually there's, let me look at this. We have a comment from our audience, from Afsal, our Afsal. May message to you, Ken. He said, thanks, Ken, for the presentation. This is something that we are looking at seriously within our planning system in Malaysia due to our rapid urbanization. Our River of Life is a watershed project that focuses on river as the catalyst of development. More and more development projects are putting in consideration on this aspect, especially considering its relationship with our cultural heritage. Do look into Selangor Maritime Gateway for a similar project in Malaysia.
Thank you very much, Hatthaya.
Yes. I think I don't see if there is any more information from our Facebook as well as from Zoom. Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Rohit, Jigyasu, Ajahn Danai, Thaitakoo, and Kenneth for joining our SESH today. And thank you to all viewers for making time to join us and for sending in your comments and questions. And from them, we have chosen the winners of the SPAFA bag giveaway. And they are from the Facebook. It's Afsal Ashari. Congratulations also. And also from Zoom, Kratika. So you all get our bags. Congratulations. So we will be in touch with the winners, Afsal and Katrika shortly. And please be also reminded that we will be posting an evaluation form based on today's session, and would appreciate if you could complete the evaluation to help us improve our future SPAFA sessions. And before the end of today's session, we are really pleased to inform you that the next SPAFA session will be titled Our Collection Methods Enabling Sustainability Through Conservation and Collections, Tools and Opportunities for Southeast Asian Collection Custodians, which will be held on 15 July next week at 2 p.m. Bangkok time, which actually is 9 a.m. in Rome time. It will be moderated by our center director and two speakers, one from ICCROM and another one from the UK. And don't miss out our future SPAFA sessions by linking and following us on our Facebook or sign up for our newsletter. We post a summary and a recording of each set, including this one, on our website at www.smeospafa.org. You can also find recordings of all of our previous sessions along with numerous other videos related to Southeast Asia's archaeology and art, as well as culture on our YouTube channel. So thank you again, everybody, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.